Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. You know that moment when you look in a mirror and realize you don't recognize the person staring back at you? It hit me one morning without warning. I wasn't crying, I wasn't breaking down, I was just still. And in that stillness, something cracked. Not like a dramatic shattering, more like a quiet fracture, an invisible line deep inside me that had been forming for years. The truth was simple but unbearable. I'd spent most of my life living for everyone but myself. I had become so good at being who everyone needed me to be. The supportive friend, the responsible child, the accommodating partner, the dependable colleague. Every role, every yes, every sacrifice, it was all part of this carefully curated performance. But no one saw the cost. Hell, I didn't even see it until I did. There had always been this whisper inside me, something I kept pushing away, a question I never let myself answer. What do I want? It sounds like such a basic thing, doesn't it? But I had no idea. I couldn't separate my own voice from the noise of expectations. Somewhere along the way, I just stopped asking. Or maybe I was just too afraid to know. But that morning, something shifted. I didn't feel angry or sad, just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of shrinking myself. Tired of ignoring that quiet ache in my chest that kept reminding me that I was missing. And for the first time, I didn't run from it. I let it sit there. I let myself feel how empty it was to live a life shaped entirely by what others wanted. That's when the question came, not like a thought, but like a deep pulse in my chest. What if, just once, I choose myself? That one question felt dangerous. Radical, even. Like stepping into forbidden territory. But it also felt like oxygen. Like truth. I didn't have any answers yet. I didn't know what choosing myself would even look like. But I knew what not choosing myself had done to me. And I couldn't go back to that. Carl Jung once said that the most important journey is the journey inward. At that moment, I finally understood what he meant. The idea of turning inward scared me more than any mountain I'd ever climbed. Because in there, I'd have to meet all the parts of me I'd buried. The ones I was ashamed of. The ones I'd rejected to stay likable, lovable, safe. And yet, there was also a strange pull. Like something inside me had been waiting for this moment. Not to explode into some dramatic reinvention, but to simply be seen. To be held. To be heard. Choosing yourself isn't some grand declaration. It starts with small things. Saying no when every fiber of your being is trained to say yes. Sitting with your discomfort instead of numbing it away. Admitting you don't know who you are anymore. And being gentle with yourself about it. That's what it looked like for me at first. Not a revolution, but a quiet rebellion. A soft but steady no more. The people around me didn't notice at first. I was still smiling, still showing up. But something was shifting under the surface. I was starting to question the roles I'd taken on. Was I doing this because I wanted to? Or because I always had? Was I being kind? Or just afraid to disappoint? It was like I suddenly had a flashlight, and I was walking through the rooms of my life, seeing everything with fresh eyes. And I have to tell you, it wasn't pretty. I found a lot of sadness in those rooms. A lot of resentment I hadn't dared to feel. A lot of dreams I'd left behind. But I also found something else. A kind of quiet courage I didn't know I had. The part of me that had always been waiting to come alive. The part that was done apologizing. I'm not saying I transformed overnight. I didn't burn everything down or cut everyone off. It wasn't about drama. It was about honesty. And it began with telling the truth to myself. I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not okay with this version of my life. And instead of judging myself for it, I let that truth breathe. That's when something beautiful started to happen. Not outside, but inside. I began to feel real. Not perfect, not healed, not even strong all the time, but real. And there's something incredibly powerful about that. If you're reading this and you felt it too, that aching sense that you've been living a life someone else designed for you, I just want you to know you're not alone. And it's not too late. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to ask the question, what if I choose me? Let that question sit with you. Because that's where everything changes. You know what they don't tell you about choosing yourself? That it'll piss people off. At first, I thought I was doing something wrong. I wasn't shouting from the rooftops. I wasn't throwing blame or burning bridges. I was just quietly starting to say no. To rest. To set boundaries. To stop explaining myself. And the strangest thing happened. People got uncomfortable. Some got distant. A few even got angry. It shocked me. I thought they'd be happy for me. Happy that I was finally showing up for myself. But instead, I got side eyes, passive-aggressive comments, accusations of selfishness. You've changed, they'd say. And you know what? They were right. I had. I was finally unlearning the version of me they had grown so used to, the one who bent, yielded, smoothed everything over just to keep the peace. The truth was, I hadn't become someone new. I just stopped pretending. That version of me they missed, that wasn't real. It was a mask I wore for their comfort, not mine. And yeah, some people weren't ready for that. My shift shook something in them. Maybe they weren't ready to look at their own compromises, their own buried truths. Maybe my honesty felt like a mirror they didn't want to look into. But it wasn't about them. It couldn't be. Not anymore. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." I think I only started to grasp what that meant when I saw how few people actually want you to do that. Not because they're bad people, but because when you stop living small, it reminds others that they could choose more too. And that's terrifying. You might think that choosing yourself will make your world bigger. And eventually it does. But first, it gets quiet. Really quiet. The phone doesn't ring as much. Invitations dry up. Some relationships start to feel awkward or one-sided or just gone. At first, it feels like loss. Like you've burned down something familiar and warm. But here's the thing no one tells you. The silence isn't empty. It's space. Space for your voice to get louder. For your values to settle. For your energy to return to you. You start noticing who sticks around and why. The ones who stay aren't clinging to who you used to be. They see you. They respect your no. They don't need you to shrink to feel comfortable. And those are the people you want to build with. Not the ones who like you better when you're tired, quiet, and constantly overextending yourself. There's a kind of grief that comes with transformation. A grief for the person you pretended to be. For the relationships built on compliance. For the time you can't get back. But there's also a kind of reverence that begins to rise. A respect for the courage it takes to look in the mirror and stop lying to yourself. I remember walking into a room one day and realizing I didn't care if they liked me. Not in a cold, indifferent way, but in a free way. I wasn't performing. I wasn't scanning faces for approval. I was just there, me, and it was enough. Letting go of who you're not makes space for who you are. And that's when everything around you starts to shift too. The invitations you do get, they feel lighter. The conversations you have, they run deeper. The connections that remain, they're rooted in mutual respect, not silent expectations. It's not always easy. I still have moments where I flinch, where the old people pleaser in me wants to smooth it all over, to make it okay for everyone else. But then I remember, I'm not responsible for their comfort. I'm responsible for my truth. And the more I walk this path, the more I realize, the ones who truly love you, they don't need you to disappear to feel seen. They'll love your light. They'll welcome your boundaries. They'll clap when you take up space, not flinch from it. So if you're in that awkward, tender in-between, where you're not who you used to be, but not yet who you're becoming, I just want to say this, stay the course. It's okay to lose what was never real. It's okay to feel alone for a while. You're not broken. You're becoming whole, and the world will catch up to your truth. It always does. There's this moment that comes, quietly but unmistakably, when you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation. Not for your choices, not for your growth, not for your peace. And when that moment arrives, it's like breathing for the first time after holding your breath for years. For me, it wasn't loud or triumphant. It was soft, gentle. I just woke up one day and knew I don't have to keep proving myself anymore. I spent so many years chasing approval like it was oxygen. Every decision filtered through the question, will they be okay with this? Will they still love me if I do this? But there's a cost to that kind of living, an invisible tax you pay with your joy, your authenticity, your energy. And one day, I just couldn't afford it anymore. Choosing myself didn't just change how I acted, it changed how I felt inside my own skin. I didn't need applause. I didn't need permission. I didn't need to perform for belonging. That was the shift. I belonged to myself. Carl Jung talked about individuation, that lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, not the version handed to you by your parents or society or trauma, but the one that's been quietly waiting beneath all the noise. That's what this was for me. Peeling back the layers, dropping the armor, meeting myself with nothing in between. And you know what surprised me the most? How good it felt to disappoint the right people. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it with clarity, because for the first time, I was choosing me, not in defiance, but in alignment. I stopped shrinking to fit their comfort, stopped apologizing for being too much or not enough, stopped needing to be understood by people who never took the time to know me. That's where the real power came in. I began to say no without guilt. I rested without justification. I spoke my truth, even when my voice trembled. And something magical happened in that space. I stopped needing to defend my existence. There's a kind of strength that grows in you when your peace no longer depends on external validation. You stop chasing what's never satisfied. You stop molding yourself to fit spaces you've outgrown. And you start standing not in defiance, but in truth. It's not about becoming hard or distant. Quite the opposite. I became softer, more present, more alive, because I wasn't exhausted from constant self-abandonment. I had energy again, for joy, for curiosity, for wonder. When you stop editing yourself for approval, the world starts to feel different. Quieter, more honest. You begin to recognize what aligns and what doesn't. Who sees you, and who only sees what you give. And you start to move differently with a kind of inner compass that doesn't shake every time someone frowns. And here's something I didn't expect. The respect you get when you respect yourself is different. People sense it. Not everyone likes it, but the ones who matter, they feel it. You become someone who's not easily swayed, not easily manipulated, not easily broken. And not because you've built walls, but because you found roots. You're no longer surviving. You're choosing. That's powerful. Of course, I still have moments. Doubts, wobbles, old patterns whispering in my ear. But they don't run the show anymore. They're just echoes. And I've learned to listen with compassion, not obedience. That's the thing about inner freedom. It doesn't mean the world stops demanding things from you. It means you stop handing over your soul every time someone knocks. I'm not perfect. I'm not finished. But I'm honest. And that honesty, it's given me something I never had before. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being okay, but the kind that says, even when it's not okay, I'm still whole. I'm still here. I'm still me. And that's enough. There was a time when my past felt like a chain around my ankle. Not always heavy, but always there, dragging behind me, whispering in my ear, reminding me of every time I messed up, every time I stayed too long, every time I chose silence instead of truth. It felt like I couldn't move forward without dragging all with me. But something shifted when I truly started choosing myself. I began to see the past for what it was. Not a definition, not a prison, but a path. A rough one, sure, full of detours and bruises, but also full of lessons. And once I stopped looking at it through the lens of shame, something softened. I stopped trying to rewrite it. I stopped needing it to have gone differently. I had done what I could with what I knew at the time, and that was enough. That realization felt like air rushing into a room that had been sealed off for years. I used to replay things over and over. Conversations I should have had. Boundaries I should have set. People I shouldn't have trusted. I thought if I punished myself long enough, maybe I'd fix something. But you don't heal by bleeding out on the floor of your past. You heal when you stand up and say, that was then. This is now. And I'm allowed to move on. Carl Jung once said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. That quote used to feel like an idea. Now it feels like a lifeline. When I started choosing myself, I realized how much of my identity had been shaped by other people's expectations. Who I thought I had to be. Who I tried to be to earn love, to avoid conflict, to feel safe. And most of that came from my past. Moments where I learned it was safer to please than to speak, safer to blend in than to be bold. But the past doesn't get to write my future anymore. It's not erased, but it's not the author now. I am. There is something deeply healing in releasing the need to be understood by people from my past. The ones who misunderstood me. The ones who only loved the version of me that didn't make waves. I don't owe them an explanation for my growth. I don't need their approval to rewrite my story. That realization was like pulling the roots of an old weed from the soil. Satisfying and long overdue. It's not that I forget. I just don't carry it the same way. I've stopped making my past a measure of what I deserve. I've stopped letting old patterns dictate new beginnings. I've stopped letting the mistakes define me and started letting the healing refine me. And with that shift came something unexpected. Peace with myself. For the first time, I could sit alone in a room, reflect on my past, and not feel shame. I could hold my younger self with compassion instead of criticism. I could see the survival in every bad choice, the fear beneath every silence, the longing behind every misplaced yes. And I could say, you did your best, and now we do better. I began to feel a lightness I hadn't known in years. Not because life suddenly got easier, but because I stopped making my past a weight I had to carry every step of the way. There's power in rewriting your relationship with where you've been. Because when you stop defining yourself by your pain, your potential starts to take up more space. And that space, that's where you begin to breathe again, to dream again, to try without the fear of repeating old stories, to connect without the fear of betrayal, to be present without always bracing for the next wound. I'm not perfect at this. Sometimes the past still taps on my shoulder. Sometimes I still flinch at memories, but they don't control me anymore. They don't steer the wheel. They're just chapters, and I've got a pen in my hand now. So if you've been living in the shadow of your own past, hear this. You don't owe it your future. You're allowed to let go, even if you don't have closure. You're allowed to begin again, even if no one else thinks you deserve to. You're allowed to be more than your mistakes. You get to choose who you become, and that choice, it's yours now. I used to think life was random, that good things happen by accident, and bad things were just bad luck. But now I see it differently. Now I believe that when you start living in alignment with who you truly are, when you stop pretending, stop pleasing, stop performing, the universe begins to respond. Not immediately, not always in ways you expect, but it does. It's almost eerie, honestly. The way things started showing up in my life after I made that quiet decision to choose myself. The right people, the right words, the right opportunities. It felt like the world had been waiting for me to wake up. Carl Jung called it synchronicity. Those meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. Like the moment you're thinking about a change, and someone calls with exactly the encouragement you needed. Or you stumble on a book, a quote, a conversation that speaks directly to something stirring in your heart. Like life is answering you, even before you know the question. I used to brush that off, but now I pay attention because I've noticed a pattern. The more I honor my truth, the more life flows instead of fights me. And I don't mean it becomes easy. Life still throws curveballs, but the resistance lessens. The friction inside fades. And the things that once felt so hard, making decisions, trusting my gut, knowing when to walk away, they begin to feel natural. When I was living in a state of self-abandonment, everything was uphill. I was exhausted all the time. Nothing seemed to stick. I questioned myself constantly. I was out of sync, not just with the world, but with myself. That's why nothing clicked. But when I started aligning with who I really was, even the hard stuff made sense. Even the losses felt like clearing space. Even the silence became fertile ground. It's like the world bends slightly to meet you when you stand in your own integrity. And it's not magic. It's resonance. Because when you stop scattering your energy, trying to be what everyone else wants, you become a signal. Clear, strong, grounded. And that signal pulls in the people, places, and moments that match who you really are, not who you've been pretending to be. The funny thing is, it's not always grand or obvious. Sometimes it's just a quiet knowing, a sense of being in the right place, a conversation that lands exactly right, a coincidence that feels like a wink from something bigger than you. And the more you trust it, the more it shows up, One of the most beautiful things I've experienced since choosing myself is how the world began to soften around me. I stopped chasing, stopped forcing, stopped trying to make things fit where they didn't. And suddenly, things started arriving. Not everything I wanted, but everything I needed. People who saw me, ideas that inspired me, paths I never considered, all because I dared to stop pretending. And yeah, sometimes it still feels strange. Like, is this real? Can it really be this simple? But it's not about ease, it's about alignment. And alignment feels like this: peace in your chest, even when the future is uncertain. Confidence in your decisions, even when no one else understands. A quiet joy that doesn't need to be loud to be true. I'm not saying everything falls into place overnight. Some days still feel messy. Some decisions still hurt. But I no longer live with that constant internal friction. I'm no longer betraying myself for belonging. And because of that, the belonging I do experience feels deeper, Toa, grounded in something real. So if you've been wondering why things feel off, why nothing seems to flow, maybe it's not about working harder. Maybe it's about listening, realigning, choosing yourself in ways that feel risky but true, and then watching what unfolds. Because I promise you, when you stop hiding, the universe notices. And it starts to meet you one quiet, beautiful synchronicity at a time. I used to be terrified of being alone. Not just physically alone, but emotionally, spiritually, soul level alone. The kind of aloneness where there's no noise left to drown out your thoughts. No one left to perform for. No distractions left to keep you from feeling what you've been avoiding. That kind of stillness used to feel like a threat. So I stayed busy. I stayed needed. I stayed surrounded. Even if it meant tolerating relationships that drained me, conversations that didn't nourish me, and versions of myself that weren't real. Because at least I wasn't alone. But then I chose myself. And for a while, everything got quiet. Friends drifted. Connections faded. The invitations slowed. Some days, it felt like the world forgot me. Like I had traded my place in the crowd for a seat in the dark. But here's what no one told me. That darkness, that silence, it's sacred. Because in that stillness, I started hearing myself for the first time in years. I started noticing what actually lit me up, what actually mattered to me. Not what looked good on paper, not what earned me praise, but what felt like home inside my own skin. I had spent so much of my life looking outside for someone to tell me who I was, what I was worth, what I should want. And suddenly, there was no one to ask, just me. And you know what? That was the beginning of everything. At first, it was awkward. I didn't know how to be with myself. I didn't know how to fill the silence without numbing it. But little by little, I got curious instead of scared. I started walking without my phone, eating without a show playing, sitting without music, just being. It felt unfamiliar, but not wrong. It felt honest. And that honesty opened something inside me. I began to feel whole, not because I had all the answers, but because I was finally showing up for the questions. I didn't need to be entertained. I didn't need constant validation. I didn't need someone else to reflect my worth back to me. I had found a kind of companionship within myself that I never knew was possible. Carl Jung said that loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unable to communicate the things that matter most to you. I felt that deeply because for the first time, I wasn't hiding from those things. I was listening to them, sitting with them, letting them reshape me. And the more comfortable I became with my own company, the less I tolerated relationships that made me feel lonelier than solitude ever did. I stopped chasing people who only loved the most convenient parts of me. I stopped explaining my boundaries to people who had no intention of respecting them. I stopped trying to be understood by people who didn't even try to understand themselves. Instead, I started attracting something else entirely. People who weren't threatened by silence, who didn't need fixing or saving, who were whole in themselves and wanted to share, not consume. People who valued presence over performance, who asked deep questions and listened with open hearts. People who didn't drain my energy, but met it, matched it, honored it. I realized something I never thought I'd believe. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. Being alone can be peace. Being alone can be power. Being alone can be the most honest, intimate, healing relationship you'll ever have, because it's the one you have with yourself. And once you know how to be with yourself, really be, you stop settling. You stop filling space with half versions of love. You stop giving yourself away to people who don't even know how to receive you. You become whole. Not perfect, not untouchable, just whole. And from that place, everything changes. Because you no longer seek completion in someone else. You seek connection. You seek resonance. You seek partnership, not rescue. So if you're sitting in that quiet space now, wondering if you've made a mistake, wondering if the silence means you've lost something, you haven't. You made room. Room for clarity. Room for healing. Room for the relationships you truly deserve. And most importantly, room for you. The real you. The one who's been waiting patiently for your own attention. There's a moment on this journey when you realize you can't go back. Not because anyone's stopping you, but because something inside you has shifted so profoundly that returning to your old life would be like trying to squeeze into clothes that no longer fit. They might still be hanging in your closet, but you're not that person anymore. And that's the thing about choosing yourself. It's not a single decision. It's a way of being. 1,000 quiet choices that, over time, rewrite the entire rhythm of your life. The way you speak, the way you love, the way you move through a room. It all starts to change, not because you're trying to be someone new, but because you're finally being who you really are. There's no ceremony for this, no final exam, no map, just this internal knowing that builds with each day you honor your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. For me, it was realizing I no longer needed someone to tell me I was doing the right thing. That craving, that endless loop of second-guessing, was gone. And in its place was something quieter, deeper. A trust in myself. Not perfect, not unshakable, but real. I remember the exact moment I knew I'd crossed some invisible line. I was sitting at a cafe, alone, sipping my coffee, watching people walk by. No one was waiting for me to check in. I wasn't rushing anywhere. My phone was quiet, and I felt peaceful, not excited, not euphoric, just grounded. And I thought, this is it. This is what it means to belong to yourself. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." I used to think that awakening would feel like fireworks. But it's not like that. It's subtler. It's the way you breathe easier. The way you speak more slowly. The way you stop apologizing for things that never needed apology. It's the way you forgive yourself. Not because someone told you to, but because carrying that weight just isn't necessary anymore. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you'll never feel afraid again. You will. It doesn't mean you'll never doubt or falter or miss the old comfort of being what others wanted you to be. You will. But it does mean that something has rooted inside you. Something that can't be uprooted by rejection or misunderstanding or loneliness. It's the part of you that knows, I've come too far to abandon myself again. That's the real shift. And yes, it can be hard. It can feel like walking through fog sometimes, making decisions with no guarantees. There's no applause here, no crowd cheering you on. Just you, and your truth, and the path you're carving with each step. But you'll find others on the road, too. Not everyone. Not right away. But they're out there. The ones who've also made the quiet, brave choice to live from within. When you meet them, it'll feel like recognition. Like breathing the same air. Like coming home in someone else's presence. Because once you know yourself, you recognize others who know themselves too. And you don't need to prove anything. You just show up fully. That's what this whole journey has become for me. Not a destination, but a way of living. A commitment to keep choosing myself, even when it's inconvenient. Even when it costs me things. Because the cost of not choosing myself is far greater. So if you're wondering whether you're ready, whether you can really do this, hear me when I say, you already have. The moment you asked the question, what if I choose me? You began. And now, there's no going back. Not because you can't, but because you don't want to. Because you've tasted what it means to be real. To be whole. To be home. Inside yourself. And once you've known that, nothing else will ever be enough again. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.